Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have with me Maxwell Ivey. And let me tell you a little bit about Maxwell. Maxwell, or Max Ivey, is a blind serial online entrepreneur with over 15 years of lived experience. His passion is advocating for accessibility and inclusion by showing business owners what's in it for them. He shares the whys and the hows. He shares his knowledge through writing, speaking, teaching, consulting, and podcasting. So today we are going to tackle that subject of accessibility is a partnership requiring education, communication, and collaboration. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Maxwell Ivey. Maxwell, so excited to chat with you today.
Well, I'm looking forward to it a lot myself. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we always start with the easy question, Max, and that is, where do you call home? Where do you live?
I live in Conroe, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. I'm a lifelong Texan. I would say most likely, though, I live online more than in person.
Well, that's true for a lot of us now. Yes, for sure. All right. So let's talk about this journey. I love to ask the people this, what has their journey been like that's led them to where they are today? And for you, I imagine there have been some challenges as a blind serial entrepreneur. So if you could just share a brief recap of what it's been like as you were growing up and then deciding to become an entrepreneur. Were you always an entrepreneur, or did you have a shift, a pivot in your career?
Right. I would say I've probably always been an entrepreneur, at least at some level. I grew up in a family of carnival owners in East Texas, always hoping to someday be part of that business and maybe have my own show. I also knew that eventually I would lose most, if not all, of my vision to retinitis pigmentosa. But with the support and encouragement of family, teachers, and scoutmasters, I graduated from traditional high school and college. I'm also one of the few blind Eagle Scouts. And I was lucky enough to be part of the business for over 15 years before my dad passed away in 2003. And by 2007, our small carnival was out of business. And I just wasn't, and still ain't one of those kind of people who can just do nothing. So I did what I knew, which was helping other people sell their used rides. And I did it online. And in 2007, accessibility was pretty much non-existent at that time. The only way I could get online without paying somebody was to teach myself to code HTML, which is not a fun thing to learn or to do. And so I thank goodness every day that WordPress eventually came along and I no longer have to chase less than's and Gregorian symbols around in my sleep at night. But I also had to learn a lot of other things about having an online business, like recruiting clients and setting fees and writing copy and collecting debts and eventually social media and so many other things. And people were like, Max, we're really impressed with how you just do the next thing you have to do, and whatever that challenge is, you just find a way, either through your own efforts or with help from friends. And we'd like to hear more about what it's like to be a blind entrepreneur. So I accepted my role and started a website called The Blind Blogger at theblindblogger.net. And since then, I've written 4 books. I've traveled the country solo. I've been on hundreds of podcasts. I eventually started my own podcast called What's Your Excuse?
I love it.
Yeah, where I interview people who have overcome adversity or thrived in spite of life circumstances. And it's really more about the journey, which is why I love this question. I tried being a life coach, but people didn't want me to be a coach. They wanted me to help them get on podcasts and maybe even start their own podcast. So I did that a while. And then eventually, about 2.5, 3 years ago, Alex Sanfilippo, who owns Podmatch,
Yeah.
he hired me to start advising him on accessibility and help him make the website that matches up podcast hosts and guests more inclusive. And so he was the first person to recognize this in me and hire me to do it. Shortly thereafter, I was talked into taking a job as a contributing writer for AudioEye.com. And when I say talked into it, I mean, we actually had physical conversations over the phone and the internet. And I kept telling them, no, I'm not fully qualified. I'm not what you want. And they kept saying, we know what we want. And finally I said, well, if y'all want to pay for it, then the odds are I must be what y'all want, and we'll see how this goes. And I started writing for them and sharing those articles. Since then, I've been hired by PHP Architect magazine to write for developers on the subject of accessibility. And finally, my most fun job, doing product evaluations for Reviewed Magazine, which is part of USA Today Network. And my last assignment for them was I got paid to play with Braille Legos.
Oh my God.
So, some of this was my own doing, but a lot of it was basically just continuing to move forward and try the next thing until finally I find myself in my perfect place in accessibility, because I have been educating people about this on a daily basis. And I'm sure you deal with people, you maybe even have clients who they've been doing something for months, years, maybe their entire life, and they just have a hard time realizing that they are the expert or thinking that they could actually turn it into a profitable business. So here I am. I'm not going to say that I'm an ideal example of how to do this, but I am going to say I'm smart enough to realize when opportunities are offered to me. I may try to argue for a little while, but I always usually say yes.
Awesome. So good. And you are the key person to talk about accessibility. I used to work for UPS for 27 years, and I was a project lead. And some of the projects in my last years started to address the need for being inclusive in terms of availability for our online presence. And having someone like you on my project team would have been awesome. Because we had to read a lot and try to figure out if we were doing it right or not. And I still think there's a long way for that business as well as others to go to having things more accessible.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more, because most businesses are still stuck in compliance mode. They're trying to figure out what will keep them out of trouble, what's the absolute least they have to do to meet whatever the government regulation is of the day, or whatever the trending legal actions are over the most recent period of time. And, just recently the UK or the EU came out with new rules. So now there's blog posts all over the internet about how you comply with those new rules. But, compliance is just the beginning of it. For the smart business, the one that realizes the potential of the market, they're going to see this more than compliance, but as innovation, as reputation, and as business growth. And I feel like that's one of the things that makes me unique in this space, because I come at it from the point of view that communication and collaboration is going to get us to where compliance and legal actions have not gotten us.
Yeah. And do you happen to know the percentage of business owners like yourself that are visually challenged. You maybe not, totally blind, but visually challenged.
I don't have that stat, but I do have a couple of good stats for you that I think you're going to like. One, depending on who you ask, the numbers on people with disabilities, and a large percentage of the disability community do deal with vision loss, or vision loss seems to be the most challenging aspect of inclusion for business owners, especially for online business owners. But generally, it's accepted that over 1 billion people globally deal with at least one type of disability, if not multiple disabilities, and that over 60 million Americans live with at least one disability. Now, that's beyond vision loss. That's also hearing loss, physical disabilities, the invisible disabilities of neurological and developmental. Even recently, I'm having to learn about some of the things that make the lives of people with dyslexia or autism more enjoyable online. So there's a wide pool of that, but those are the two numbers I think people should carry with them. And then a third number is, it's pretty much agreed that only about 5% of the internet is considered completely accessible. Now, I disagree with the term completely accessible, because I've learned, and I think you would agree with me from your work, that accessibility, especially in the digital space, is a progress or a process, and you're never going to get to 100%. As long as you get to the 90%, and as long as you're continuing to make sincere, consistent effort, I feel like you can call yourself inclusive. And I really feel like we would do ourselves a lot of good if we would focus more on sincere effort rather than arbitrary standards.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that you talked about the dyslexia and the autism, because again, I several years ago started to look into that a little bit. I have a nephew who's on the spectrum as autistic. He actually is in college right now and doing a 4.0, so yay for all that he's accomplished. But it's a lot of things you don't think about, sounds, and for the way that you present copy and things. And I think it's really an interesting area to learn more about as we create these online opportunities for growth and learning.
Right. Just think about how many cool aspects for web developers can trigger somebody with autism. Just think about what we're starting to learn from government agencies about the potential advantages that somebody with ADHD can have over someone who doesn't have ADHD when required to review large amounts of tedious data and come up with, distill that down into what's happening in the world. And so that's another thing that's interesting, is we're starting to find the benefits, the advantages of hiring people with disabilities based on whatever industry somebody may be in.
Yeah. So wonderful. So what is the most common website mistakes that you've found so far whenever we're trying to have accessibility for this diverse audience?
Right. I'm going to cover a couple of things that probably don't come up as often in what you've read about accessibility. One is, we really need to keep things simple. When you are trying to navigate the internet with adaptive technology, you generally are moving slower than your able-bodied counterparts. So one of the best ways to make my life easier and the lives of many people like me is to limit the amount of information that you have on any one page of your website. Try to build your website so that I can go from one main item to the things related to that main item. And I'm happy to see that a lot of people are starting to find a benefit to that for SEO and search engine optimization. I think some of that has to do with fewer items on the screen is also better for people visiting your websites using mobile devices. So
Mm-hmm.
those things kind of go together. And so the less items on a page or a screen, the better. So keep it simple. The next one most people are probably not aware of is that generally when you use adaptive technology, you have to sacrifice the regular ability to use a mouse.
Mm.
So you may not be able to do the mouse clicks that other people can do. And so I really encourage people to design their websites, their apps, their software from the keyboard approach first, and then expand to mouse options, to the swipe options that some people have on their computers as well as on their mobile devices. Start from the keyboard and work out or up, depending on how you look at it. And if you're adding keyboard options after the fact, as you add them in, create a resource so people like me can find what the keyboard commands are to make your website or your app do what we need it to do. And then focus on what's the most important thing for your business. I know that people who design websites will tell you this. When somebody visits your website, they shouldn't have to guess why they're there. Well,
Mm-hmm.
as part of that, when I come to your website, if you focus on the most important thing, then you're a whole lot less likely to make the common mistakes that cause problems for accessibility. So if your website is designed to sell your services as a lawyer, a coach, or a consultant, then I should very quickly be able to find out what type of consultant you are, what your background is, what your fees are, what your reputation is, and then be able to go to either schedule a meeting with you if you prefer to meet with people, or go to making a purchase from you, whether that's actually signing up to buy your services or possibly buying one of your books. We want to make it so that we focus on the most important thing. If your website is designed to sell products, say you're selling merchandise or clothing, then you want to make it as easy as possible for us to find the items, to determine whether or not you offer an item that we're interested in. Is it available in the size or color that we need it to be in? And then again, to the shopping and closing the sale. So
Mm-hmm.
any type of distraction you can eliminate along the way is great. Now, most people have probably heard about the alternative text tags where you add descriptions to your images. Those are great. And I hope that people don't start to think that artificial intelligence means they don't have to keep adding them. I do hope that people will remember to add those text descriptions to their images. Most website building software, most content management systems will prompt you to add them. So you pretty much have to ignore the prompts to not add them. And it's another opportunity to be found on the website because it's documented that the search engines are monitoring your alternative text descriptions. They're indexing those, and it's another way for people to find their way to your website. Uh, One other thing I'd like to mention is if you do have a lot of images on your website, most people are familiar with alt text, as I said, but most people don't think about colors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had perfect vision up until I was 5 or 6 years old. So I have a lot of color and other visual memories, but there was only 16 colors in my box of Crayolas. So there are a lot of colors nowadays that I run across on the internet. I have to ask somebody, what the heck is that? So these are, just little things that most people probably wouldn't think of that can cause somebody a big problem. And then finally, if you've made the effort to build accessibility into your website, your app, or your content, try not to break it. Most people aren't aware of just how fragile accessibility is. It doesn't take a big change in a website to frustrate the user,
Mm.
because since it takes us longer to do things, we generally try to figure out, well, how do we make it do this? And then every time we go back to that website or app, we know that we can make it do that again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make small changes, it could make it where we have to totally re-navigate your entire website all over again. So keep that in
Right.
mind. And if you really want to do somebody like me a big favor, when you make updates to your website, and you know you have disabled people as users and you have a way of contacting them, suggest, reach out in advance and go, I'm thinking about doing this to the website, and I would like to know what you think the impact might be on your user experience. Or when you do make those decisions and you've decided it's my website, I'll change it when I want to, at least send me an email or contact me in some form and go, we have changed the website from this to this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to finding the button to share my content here, it's going to be there instead. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you're used to me using dashes between words in my URL structure and I'm changing it to underscores, those are the kind of things. They're very small,
Yeah.
but they can cause me to have to start all over again. And this is why the most frustrating websites on the internet for people like me are social media sites, because they are the worst offenders at changing things just to change them.
Yeah. So good. One of my businesses I have is an anti-aging and wellness business, as a partner in a larger company. And that website is, if you go to shop, it's just products. And if you're visually impaired, I think it would be difficult for you to really know anything about that. Just the picture, the image of the product. So I wonder, what would you suggest for a company like that to be able to, would AI help to add, like if you hover over it, it gives a content or
AI can be very helpful with things like that, and there's some open source stuff that they may consider installing to lean on that, to give descriptions. The best way, of course, is just to have whoever's adding the images add the alternative text when they upload the images and add them to the website. However, that can get challenging if you're adding an item that's available in multiple colors. So AI could be a good option, but it is not a complete substitute for somebody willing to make the effort to describe those photos as they're being added. But here's another way you can go about this. And this is something I advocate, but I'm kind of in the minority in the disability community. I have no problem in what I like to call done for you. If you want to set up a system where I can directly contact somebody in your customer service department to create my account, submit my images, inquire about available products, I have no issue with that. And I think that sometimes that can be a great way to solve accessibility issues by circumventing the whole process of using somebody's website to find the information. One of the things I run into quite often is, it seems like just about any new site I want to join, I have to submit an image. And everybody has their own process for doing that, their own dimensions, their own resolutions.
Right.
And a lot of times they want you to put your image into a box or a dashed circle or whatever.
Yeah.
And so one of the places where I find done for you works great is for them to have a little link right beside it that says, if you're having issues uploading your image, just click this and email it to us and we will take care of it for you.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't see it as less than, but there are some people in the disability community who feel like anything less than meeting the requirements so that people can be completely independent is not exactly accessible. But I take a more practical user ability approach to these things, and I really feel like the goal should be, can the person with a disability interact with the business at the same level as other people? And whatever method you choose to make that happen in, I personally think that is okay. And I personally think we need to spend more time on communication and collaboration. I mentioned that Podmatch, Alex was the first person to hire me. When I first signed up for that service, it was really bad. And one of the things that we did in the beginning is his wife, Alicia, who's a wonderful lady, very
Yes, yes.
smart businesswoman who doesn't like being in front of the camera or behind the microphone, but very, very smart. She ran a successful fashion boutique in a brick and mortar for over 5 years. And trust me, it don't get a lot tougher than that.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, Max, why don't you email me what you think your profile should be? And I will put it into
Yeah.
the thing so that you have a profile and people can start booking you to interview you as a guest. I'm like, that's great. And then it was, okay, send me your image and then send me, what you think your keywords ought to be. And so and then as far as using the search engine or booking events, people did start to reach out to me. And I didn't have any problem with finding shows or sending them messages, but I did have a problem booking events. But we came up with a workaround. And then what was really cool is I got to teach my workaround for the date and time selection section to other people with disabilities that were joining Podmatch
Awesome.
because they knew that Alex was dedicated to making the platform accessible. So and it was really cool. And I know some people as business people would think, yeah, Max, it's a little odd for you to, basically give this information to each new user of a website. But I just thought it was cool. I'd get these emails and they would want to know, it would be like, well, Alex or Alicia says that I should contact you about this. And I had a stock email that I would reply to them with what they needed to do to navigate the date and time section. And then, of course, they've fixed that. And they've added an accessible option for selecting the date and time, which makes that better. And, of course, the really cool thing is when you are on podcast and or Podmatch and you're a paid member, you can actually get paid as both a host and a guest, depending on how much activity you have on the website and how many people you refer to the website. So it's been a really cool experience. I mentioned earlier that we need to see it as a process rather than an end destination, that, we have to communicate and collaborate. So me and their team, we communicated on what the goal was, what the needs were, and how do we get there? How do we get there today? And then what can we do about it so that a year or two from now we won't have to have hacks or workarounds to get there. And I feel like that's another thing that's holding a lot of businesses back. I think there are a lot of companies that would really love to be more inclusive, but they're like, I've got 10 years of a website or 5 years of a website. I don't really want, how do I do that? And they get overwhelmed, they become afraid, and they start thinking, well, maybe I don't have to worry about it. Maybe it's something that just never come up for me in my business. And so I really feel like if we could talk about this more in a non-threatening, positive, let's have a conversation and figure this out, or, a solutions finding approach to it. I think a lot more business owners would be more accessible on their products and their services. And I think a lot more people would even start to hire us. I mean, I don't know about you, but there isn't a lot in this world that just really makes me angry. But one thing that makes me angry is seeing our politicians lowering the age of eligibility to work so that teenagers and children can get jobs while people with disabilities have no jobs.
Yeah.
But there again, I feel like it's an overwhelm. It's, they're afraid of what is it going to cost? And am I going to have to, am I going to have to go with whatever they tell me, or will we be able to work this out? And I feel like the disability community has done a very poor job of making people feel comfortable with the idea of doing this, much less the fact of actually doing it.
Yeah. You're the second person I interviewed in 2 days with a blindness issue. And both of you are very successful at showing that you contribute to our society, and why not hire you? I mean, really, why not?
Let's stop just a second and think about this. I attended Podfest in 2019. I was the only blind person at the conference. And the organizer, Chris Kremitsa, said, he was going to work on getting more people with disabilities there the next year. The next year, I was one of two people who was visually impaired, and there was a third who had cerebral palsy. So there was three of us there. But I can't tell you the last time I have been on a podcast where the host was able to tell me, Max, you're the second person with vision loss that I've interviewed this week. I mean, think about that. Today, that right there shows you how things have changed and can change.
Yeah.
But we got to stop scaring the death out of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Max, we could talk forever, and I swear, anytime I come across anybody that can use your service, I am going to definitely recommend you. It's been just such a pleasure. And if anyone out there has enjoyed this conversation and really, really wants to start to make a difference on their website or their online presence, and I want you to be able to connect with Max. So here is the screen with his contact information. As always, for those that are just listening, I will give it to you orally, but for those of you that are able to take a screenshot, go ahead and do so. There's a lot of information here, but let's start with the website for Maxwell Ivey. It is theaccessibilityadvantage.com, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. On Facebook is Maxwell Ivey, LinkedIn, Maxwell Ivey, Twitter, Maxwell Ivey, Pinterest, Maxwell Ivey. So you could search his name on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Pinterest. For Instagram, he is the Blind Blogger. Initial cap there, so the Blind Blogger. YouTube, Midway Marketplace, is that right?
No, we've changed that. It's also now Maxwell Ivey.
All right, so we're going to update that. That will show Maxwell Ivey. And then I'm going to turn it over to Max to talk to you about, when you go to his website, what can you find that might be helpful for you, the latest content, and any of his social media that he spends the most time in. Maybe that Blind Blogger Instagram site is that, but we'll turn it over now to you, Max, to just shine on the stage a little bit here and tell us all about your website.
Well, thank you. And first, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you reading that information. Most podcasters record in video, but most people consume the podcast in audio. And I tell people, your podcast listeners are just like me. They're blind. They can't see you. So I appreciate that recitation there. That's very helpful. When they visit my website, it is a relatively new website. I did mention it has taken me a while to accept my role in the arena, but they can find my contact information, a way to connect with me and have a conversation. There's a news section, which will be my latest content, whether that's a blog post, an article I've contributed somewhere else, or my most recent podcast interview. I like to make sure that people can find the hosts that have been generous enough with their time and their audience to let me come and spend some time with them. And of course, if there's any recent accomplishments with any of my clients, if somebody has made some significant strides in accessibility, you'll also find that there. And I'm hoping to share more examples of website and app, people with online presences who have made the effort. So I'm looking forward to continuing to lean into all these years that I've been out here doing this stuff, and hopefully help a lot more people begin the process of making their website, their app, their content more inclusive. The truth of the matter is that this is not only good for people with disabilities, but most things you do to improve accessibility will improve the user experience for everyone else. And as we mentioned earlier today, it does give you the opportunity to reach a huge market, a mostly untapped market of highly loyal consumers who are ready and waiting to engage with products and services that are inclusive. So awesome. a lot of good reasons, and this is why I call it the accessibility advantage. And just finally, when it comes to employment, which we didn't talk about much, but it is important, when you are willing to make the effort to try to hire people with disabilities, you give yourself the opportunity to hire someone who will be dedicated, loyal, positive. And most of us, because we have had to, creative solution finders that are willing to be part of the process of making them even more a part of your team and your staff and your business. So lots of great reasons to embrace accessibility and inclusion. And like I said, that's why I call it the accessibility advantage. And I really hope that more people start to see this as a competitive advantage, because as I mentioned earlier, that's going to get us to inclusion.
Awesome. I did want to, you said that you have a podcast. I don't think I put the podcast on here. I will add that. The podcast name?
Podcast is called What's Your Excuse?
What's Your Excuse? Yes, we will add that. So definitely check out What's Your Excuse. Is it available on all the social, on YouTube and everywhere?
It's on all the podcast players. And
okay.
Just one other thing I'd like to mention. I have recently been hired to become one of the co-hosts of a podcast called Hearsay Shorts, which is also about accessibility. And after Labor Day, I plan to launch a second podcast of my own, all about the accessibility advantage. So people can look forward to that by following my website.
Awesome. So much great information. Well, Max, it's been such a pleasure. I definitely want to have you to come back and you know, this next time though, I want to hear about your first 5 years being with the circus. I think that would be a fun conversation to have.
I'm happy to talk to you about being with the carnival. And there was one winter we did actually travel with a circus. It was surreal having rides and animals on the same lots at the same time. That was an experience. And yeah, there was the only problem I have with those times is I have to have a little notice, because I have to think, which stories can I tell? Won't get nobody in trouble or make the industry look bad, you know? Because I see myself as a Carney kid. I grew up in an industry. I'm very proud of the work that I did, and my family still does in that arena. And so I try not to do or say things that will reflect poorly on people that are really just trying to make a living, same as everybody else.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's some leadership lessons in the life of a Carney.
Oh, yeah. We can definitely talk about self-determination, determined positivity,
resilience,
and interdependence. 3 of my favorite topics. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, gosh, it's been so much fun. I loved having you on. And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.